All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Wild Enrichment podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about a few different topics here, and we're actually joined by a repeat guest, Ben Martin. He was in the browse episode, and he's a self-proclaimed browse expert.
Surprise, surprise! I might be able to talk about some other things.
Yes, so that's the intention today, is to actually talk about other things as well. Ben's a good friend of mine, so I figured I would bring him on for some more episodes, so it's not just me talking about different topics and just me blabbering on about enrichment. This way, we kind of get to bounce ideas off of each other and try a few different things. So we're trying a different format here. We're trying to figure out what works for the podcast going forward. So definitely let us know what you think about this sort of format, because we'll be throwing out a few more episodes like this, and then go from there. Hopefully do some more interviews and stuff like that as the weeks go on. But this is sort of the standard podcast that we were thinking about doing. So today we're going to be talking about a few different things with Ben here. Actually a couple days ago, I think I released it last week. It's currently February 7th. So in that late in January there, I released the survey results that I actually posted a little while ago. So I had three main questions. What was the biggest challenge your enrichment program faces? And do you think more animal enrichment / welfare education and training for management and keepers could benefit overall animal welfare at your facility? What content would you like to see more of from Wild Enrichment? Those are the three kind of questions. So I thought it would be cool to sort of break down what we found from those questions, and share the results in case you didn't see the Facebook post. If you want to see the actual graphs and all that, I figured sharing my screen and all that wouldn't translate very well, since this is being released as a video and as just audio by itself. So if you want to actually go see these graphs, go over to my Facebook page and my Instagram page, and they'll be posted there, and you can kind of check them out. They are pretty interesting. We actually had quite a few respondents, about 122 respondents. So thank you for everybody that responded. And if you're listening to this, thank you. So I kind of gave them multiple choice questions here. But basically, the first question, what is the biggest challenge your enrichment program faces? I feel like we kind of knew what the answers were going to be, because, they're pretty much similar problems across the board, which is good and bad. Because it's good because, if you can provide an answer, it can actually help a lot of people. But bad because we're all facing the same problems, which, can be large problems depending on what they are. So
I do think with your first question here, like what is the biggest challenge your enrichment program faces? I'm amazed by looking at how diverse the answers were. Much as they may break down into category, everyone has a lot of different problems that they're trying to break down. Like, they didn't feel like there were three categories and they all kind of fit into the box. There are so many different challenges enrichment programs face, and it's just by the nature of how it fits into your day.
So I'm also learning how Google Forms works, because I put a couple categories and then a couple multiple choice answers, and I put other. And a lot of people wrote their question, if there was combos. I should have done all of the above, because a lot of people basically said all of the above. It's not a very clean pie. We got a couple big slices, and then we got like 1,000 little slices because of the way Google Forms works. So it's not a clean pie as the way you traditionally see with pie charts here. But essentially, just over 35% of people responded with, there's not enough time in the day to get all the enrichment done. So that's the biggest problem that people face. Second was the facility not prioritizing enrichment / the welfare of the animals, which is pretty interesting. I actually didn't think I'd get as many responses of that for that to this question. That's not the best thing, because I think with a lot of the other solutions here, like not enough time in the day, Well, I'll just give you all the answers here, and then we can talk about them. That's a little bit better. But not enough staff, which is sort of ties into not enough time in the day. You know, if there's more staff, then you have more time in the day, and staff not putting in effort to the enrichment. So, and then all of the other little slices essentially boil down into all of the above, or resources and money. So that's kind of the breakdown there. But yeah, so the one that surprised me the most was definitely facilities not prioritizing enrichment, because that can feel like a bigger problem when you're working at a facility. You know, I think because it's hard. It's hard if you just don't have time in the day. You know, there's things that you can cut, and kind of a restructuring of your day, and sort of a time audit that you can do in your day to kind of see what you can prioritize in order to do more enrichment.
I'd actually be really interested. This might be something that we talk about further on, like maybe we put out another survey just on this slice, because like this is more, we're branching out into my personal philosophy. By the way, the browse puns will continue branching out left, right, and center.
We want them, Ben. Give them to us.
But when I look at staff, or it's facilities not prioritizing enrichment, the zookeeping field in my mixed metaphors that I'm going to throw out there, I look at it as one big onion, right? There's critical care components, there's food, water, sunlight, space. Like, you've got these very, very basic, what it takes to keep the animal alive. And as zookeeping has kind of elevated as a career, and as facilities understand more about these animals, like
as a science,
slices, the onion keeps getting these layers onto it, right? Where enrichment was, in the early days, it's we put them together with a couple other animals, they're good, that's all they need to do. And then the keeper involvement has, I think, it's skyrocketed on the enrichment front. So like lots of facilities, you're seeing jobs come out there for this kind of stuff. You got forms, you got AZA requirements, that are coming out for this kind of stuff, and it's just becoming more and more of a requirement. And so those layers, I'm sure that as facilities grow, there's growing pains with that, where your staffing level was 30 before. If you do all the enrichment in the day, it's going to take up to 40 staff or something, but the facility is not going to just keep increasing staff that way, because it's a qualitative number. It's not quantitative. It's not like you're not going to throw more people through the door because you're taking care of these animals better. So, facilities are going to have these hard decisions to make in terms of like money versus quality care. And, truthfully, a lot of facilities are making the right choice on quality care, but I think it's a delayed reaction to how the field is changing and how knowledge base is being put forward.
Yeah, I think it's the actual role of zookeeper is becoming different, and more different every single year as the science evolves, and as we understand more and more what we actually need to provide these animals for them to thrive in captivity, not just exist in captivity. So I think it's definitely evolving, and it takes a long time for these companies to sort of catch up to where the job needs to be versus where it is now versus where it was 10 years ago. And I don't always think it requires more staff. It just requires I think a lot of the time, sometimes it does, because there's some facilities that are, most facilities are understaffed, but there's some places that are chronically understaffed to the point where, everybody's giving it their all, because there is that slice of the pie. 12% of people did say that staff were not putting effort into enrichment. So I wonder if that 12% across the board came and started actually understanding enrichment and putting more of an effort to it, like how that would affect the rest of the pie, because I think that's huge. If you're not utilizing those resources appropriately, like your staffing resources appropriately, that can have a major effect. If you're already, close to being understaffed or being understaffed, it's if you don't have those people working toward that common goal, you're definitely going to run into problems there.
And I do think that this survey, the amount of different types of zoos, small, medium, large, like very private, public, you're encompassing a lot of different size zoos that may have, like, there may be a maintenance department that's able to build, or carpenters that are able to build some things for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And other things, it's literally like the zookeeper is the only staff here, so you're doing everything already. And I could see how that would pile up quickly, where it's
Yeah.
if you don't have enough time in the day because you're being pulled in 10 different directions covering everything from ticketing all the way through,
Yeah.
then maybe that becomes a big draw in your day where you're like, okay, well, I could design a bunch of enrichment items, but that's going to be a full day, and I'm never going to be given a full day of just making enrichment to give me your base level palette to pull
Yeah.
from.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes into facilities not prioritizing enrichment, because I think if facilities, a lot of places understood what's needed, there wouldn't be as many zookeepers that are also janitors, that are also maintenance workers, that are also, taking care of, the lawn and maintaining gardens and that kind of thing. I think there would be less of that happening, because it is a complex job and it does require a lot more than just changing water and putting food out, as we're beginning to understand. So, and I don't say beginning because I say that a little facetiously, because it's not necessarily new that we have known this. So,
and I think something we're maybe not even hitting now is you've put this survey out during a global pandemic where time in the day is of the essence. Like
it's true.
There are cuts across the board. I'm sure that there are hundreds of zoos out there that are struggling and have had to make tough choices. Like I've seen, we've got you've already talked to the zoo creepers, one of the heads of that. Seeing that site blow up and seeing other resources that zookeepers have talking about how they've had layoffs and the job doesn't change just because
stuff out there.
We have money problems. Like you still have to take care of the animals and you have a standard that you want to hold.
Yeah.
You're already making tough choices on where you have to prioritize spending your time.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So I think a lot of those squares can kind of, they're not separate things. I think not having enough time in the day does go with not enough staff, and not putting effort into enrichment also is a huge time drag. So I think they're all sort of related there, which was interesting to see. So the next one that we actually put out was, do you think more animal enrichment / welfare education and training could benefit overall animal welfare at your facility? So overwhelmingly, it was yes, which is positive, I think, because if it was overwhelmingly no, then that would be, if you can't fix something with just education, it's a pretty large problem. So I think the fact that and that also ties into the fact that, facilities aren't prioritizing enrichment. I think if they understood animal welfare and, enrichment concepts in general, they'd probably start prioritizing it more. So I think it's very good that almost 80% of the people said that they could benefit from that.
Mm-hmm. I do think as a career, this was probably a more expected than most answers, just because as a career, like zookeeping, no one goes into zookeeping being like, oh, we know everything about every animal species. There's, it's just pulling from what's already out there. Like you go into this field because it's so unique. There's so much unknown. There's so many exciting avenues to approach the topic that that there's going to be learning opportunities across the board.
Yeah.
So that's good to see that 80% of people are still really excited about learning more about something that they might not know everything about already.
Yeah. No, it is good to see that. 16% of people did say maybe, but that's fair. You don't know how things are going to change with education. Everybody's been part of an education program or a revolutionary new training in an organization that doesn't seem to have the effect that it was supposed to. So it's definitely what we're trying to do at Wild Enrichment, is to put out more educational materials and to raise awareness around animal welfare and proper enrichment practices for animals in captivity. So it's good to see that it is needed, and we'll definitely continue to put out information that hopefully that you find interesting around that and useful. And then we asked, what content would you like to see more of from Wild Enrichment? And overwhelmingly, more build guides, more build videos, webinars, workshops for facilities, and more articles surrounding animal welfare. We have a lot of articles, and we're definitely working on webinars. Stay tuned for those. But we definitely need to get back in the build guides and build videos. I started Wild Enrichment with the sole intention of just making build videos and build guides, and it kind of turned into something a little bit different because I felt build guides they're very useful for a handful of people, but I find they have trouble kind of translating into different scenarios. There's so many different scenarios where one enrichment item might not work for a specific animal in a different place because of other animals there and they share the exhibit with, or the design of the exhibit. Like a rolling hay feeder, for example. It's great for a lot of hoof stock, but if you have a moat around your exhibit, it's useless, right? So it's hard to make enrichment that's sort of a generic cure-all for a specific species or for a group of animals. So,
and when you do have an enrichment item like that, chances are some company out there is already making it.
Yeah,
plastic, exactly. Mass producing it for dogs, cats, whatever.
Yeah. So we're definitely not. I'm definitely not against putting that content out, but there will be more of it coming out, hopefully soon. But yeah. So there is definitely a lot of articles, and we'll be putting out more of those. But it was interesting to see that almost 40% of people really want more build guides, and another 20% wanted more build videos. So more than half that pie. So it was definitely interesting to talk about there, to see in that pie chart. Again, you can go see these charts and these questions on my Facebook and Instagram page if you want to take a look at them. Yeah, so we just have a couple points here. We want to do a whole other episode, a podcast episode, and potentially a video and stuff like that on time sensitive enrichment and easy enrichment, because obviously time was the biggest factor that is limiting people for enrichment. So yeah, Ben had the idea of this enrichment palette, so maybe you could sort of talk about that.
So when we were brainstorming about this podcast, it was just, I always had this vision of enrichment as you want to have your tried and trues, your things that you can pull from in every day. And maybe I've been watching too much Bob Ross in this pandemic, or maybe, it's just been on my mind a lot of having this paint palette going. But I like to look at enrichment as maybe having this, this basic palette, and you're mixing colors together, and you're mixing different enrichments together that combine to create more complex things. And so we were talking about maybe putting something out there that gives you almost a basic toolkit to start building for yourself, for different species, different genus, that at least gives you something to start on, and then you can always build off of it from there. So a lot of us talk about, I think every facility or most facilities are using boxes in some form, bottles, logs, you've got these basic puzzle feeders, scent enrichment, that kind of stuff. It creates this kind of base for you that you can start building and combining to create more complex enrichment that really kind of gives you variety where you need it most.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's it's really cool to think about it like that, because it kind of makes it a little bit more simple, and it's definitely, it would be easier for a facility or Wild Enrichment to put out a sort of guide that talks about that sort of concept, and what are your basics, and how can you kind of mix and match them. And that's, I also think, and kind of building on that, I think a lot of people, when they're worried about giving their animals novel enrichment or stuff that's really going to elicit an amazing reaction, I think one of the easiest ways to actually do that is to figure out a different way of presenting enrichment that you've already given them. So I think combining enrichment items, like if you have a zip line and you have some enrichment items that you can hang on the zip line that you don't usually present them that way. I think that's a great way of actually making something that you already have completely new, instead of actually trying to come up with a completely new enrichment item or a new concept. I think different ways of combining things will definitely elicit a completely new response from an animal. So it is an easy way of doing that. So I've also put enrichment calendars. A lot of facilities already do this, but this is a great way of also dealing with, staff not putting in effort into enrichment, because I've definitely worked with people. They have the intention of doing the enrichment. It's just, I think they get so caught up in what am I going to give this animal to that's actually going to make it do something, instead of trying to just think of the tried and true things that do elicit reactions. They get too caught up, and then they just throw a ball into an exhibit and call it enriched. So I think creating an enrichment calendar, sitting down at the beginning of a month and coming up with a month worth of enrichment and posting that, so you just eliminate the thinking from a lot of those people. So you don't really need to think about it, and you can just put it in. Obviously, there's challenges if you have a really motivated team that really wants to do those new presentations and come up with new ideas all the time, and you have the time to do that. Enrichment calendars have the opposite effect. They're very, very limiting, and they can really make you not want to do new enrichment ideas. But I think if you have a team that's struggling with time, and maybe some team members that aren't really putting as much effort in as they should, I think an enrichment calendar is a great way of kind of setting the bar and showing them what you want, as opposed to just getting angry at them for not doing it.
Yeah, and I think that there's like I have some love-hate relationships with enrichment calendars, because I do feel like there's something like in keeping in general, there's this need to have a little bit of free choice for the keeper, so you have something to build with.
Yeah.
And that's why I like this idea of an enrichment palette, having things at your disposal so that it's easy to pull from, to make or to do. Like you can throw a ball in, but you have a schedule that says, I got a ball yesterday. You're writing it down.
Yeah.
I've found that sometimes it can have the opposite effect, right? Where an enrichment calendar gets put out there, and maybe if you didn't immediately put the effort into ensure that everything is available at any given time, or if there's this box is being put there, there's only one box in the pile, and you use it, it's one of the few items this animal can get, but there's no replenishing or something like that. The enrichment calendar gets very restrictive very quickly, where someone needs to keep on top of it. So that is more beneficial, I think, when there's maybe a point person for those animals, whereas it's someone's job to make sure that they're keeping up with dispersing enrichment. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think we come into you're going back to the organization of enrichment, and how using your resources effectively to distribute it evenly across the facility is really important.
Yeah.
Because I do think enrichment calendars, as good as they are, they have good intentions. Some keepers, it can have the opposite effect, where they don't want to deal with that at all. Because
I think it really depends on the team and who's using it, for sure. So also, just tying into kind of easy enrichment here, because we're just going to skim these two topics, and then I think we'll go into them more in a separate podcast where we can really kind of dive in and come up with solutions to these problems. But I think one of the biggest overlooked things to do with an enrichment program for a specific animal, and it's easy and doesn't take any time, is really actually looking at the environment the animal's in. I think a lot of people, there's a lot of animals out there that are put in subpar environments, and enrichment is a Band-Aid for those subpar environments. And I think looking at those environments and thinking about how you can make them better suited to the animal is going to give them way more enrichment and way more bang for your buck with the enrichment, with the time that you're actually putting into it, as opposed to just putting enrichment in every day and then still wondering why the animal's having, negative behavioral consequences. I think actually looking at how you can redesign the furniture in the exhibit, how you can, make different hiding places, use different substrates, really just look what the animal's in the wild and really try to mimic that, as opposed to just putting enrichment in and wondering why the animal's acting the way it's acting.
Yeah, and I think even looking at your exhibit and having maybe compartmentalized, like removable pieces that you can add in, so you can do complete exhibit changes without breaking the bank, or completely like taking the whole day on one animal just to make the exhibit redone.
Yeah,
making sure that you have these kind of removable components that you can add in, or change shelving, or change perching, or change whatever, all that. Like, I don't know, I love the idea of having a ton of different hangable spots, and then making sure that you're changing your enrichment on a schedule. Maybe like once a month you go, okay, well, we're going to change up the ropes around this exhibit for these primates, or the perches need to be changed in X, Y, Z. And, agree with your team on what a schedule should be for a complete exhibit makeover,
Mhm.
or even a compartmentalized version of that. And that might help you a lot, looking at it in that lens and saying, well, at least we're giving them a slow changeover, like a large scale changeover on
Mhm.
a longer timeline. And then day to day, you're getting these enrichment items in.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think it's very important. I would rather have an animal in an environment 24 hours a day that it's finding, like let's say it's finding the 24 hours a day, it's finding its environment a 6 out of 10. I would rather like an animal sitting in a 6 out of 10 enrichment level than have a very, very subpar environment that's a 2 out of 10 and you're giving it a 4 out of 10 enrichment item, every single day. I'd rather the animal be in a better environment 24 hours a day than interacting with enrichment a couple hours a day maximum. So I think it's important to really think about what the animal's environment is and critically look at it and kind of see where you can add things and where you can make it better. Because I think you do that once, that could last a couple months, that could last even longer, and I think that's a one-time investment that'll keep on giving. So, and kind of making it modular, as you were saying, that you can easily swap stuff out and having some different things on the go is a fantastic way of using your time effectively and actually getting more bang for your buck with your enrichment time that's being put into it. So
And I do think, like, while we're still on the topic of easy enrichment or environmental enrichment stuff, um, this is where it's so critical to have keeper involvement right off the bat in designing exhibits, where you have, someone that's there that's saying, well, I'm going to need to use this every day. And so can we put like a hanger here? Can we put a water feature here? Can we put, these 10 perching pieces so I know that I have something to work with? Because nothing's worse than walking into a new exhibit that's never, like, you've never really done anything in it, and you go, well, there's not much I can do. I can only add to it
mhm.
on independent compartmentalized pieces. I can't tie into anything. I have to start redesigning the whole space just to suit me, and it's
Yeah,
not built for what I'm doing. So
yeah. I think it's important to kind of think of all those things when you're looking at an exhibit. And it's easy when you're working in an exhibit every single day in, day out. Like it's honestly, it's hard to actually realize what the exhibit looks like critically. Like it's only when you take a step back and really look at it, you're like, oh, like this is not really an appropriate space, like perching wise or den wise or whatever for that animal. So I think actually really critically looking at it is a good way of coming up with easy enrichment. So, and you've also put a note about using the environment that you're kind of in.
oh yeah, like I think in we're in Canada, so we've obviously got this lovely snow and tons of leaves in
Lovely.
the fall. There's these great things already built in, so using those to your advantage on the day to day is not
Yeah.
only, it's great for the animal. I'm sure if you involve your PR department or you're making sure that you're taking good footage of it, it's absolutely adorable when you put a snowman out there and you see an
Yeah.
animal go after it.
Great. Yeah.
It is a great novelty to really use the environment in a different way. Like, I
Mhm.
know, even like I was caring for peafowl recently, and I piled up the leaves, and I was going to pick them up the next day, and I watched these peacocks just swarm the leaf pile, and they're like, what the heck is this? This is fantastic. I had no idea, and these leaves have been in there for a while, so
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just funny what happens when you just rearrange some of the stuff that's already in the exhibit for them. By you
Yeah.
touching it, it's
Yeah.
almost like it's magically changed the
Yeah.
fundamental structure of what that is.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that's important. So those are just some important things that we thought we could touch on. We'll definitely go into those topics a little bit more because I think those are the questions that most people have. So speaking of questions, we did actually have a few articles that we were going to talk about, but I think we're already at like half an hour here, so we'll save there's some good articles that we want to talk about, but I think we'll save them and go to some more questions from social media that we got for the podcast.
Well, and I think that maybe this is just an idea, because so as you guys know, as an audience, like, I'm new here. We're trying something different here. Maybe do you want to put these articles out there, and maybe we can get some other people's perspectives on them, and maybe talk about them next week.
Yeah.
or next time we do this. Like this is going to be a conversation, and if you guys have any questions, comments, things you want to talk about, things you want to comment on that we've talked about today, we're looking for that feedback so that we can actually make this a discussion with people that are on the ground doing this, because this is that's what we need, is a lot of communication in this category, right?
Yeah, no, and I reached out for a couple questions, and we have a few questions that we were going to talk about here. So I definitely want to continue doing that. If you do have any more questions, feel free to. I will be putting some posts out there for the questions. So definitely ask them, and we'll talk about them on the podcast. Or feel free to message Wild Enrichment, and I will get back to you. So the first question here is, what are some telltale signs that an animal is lacking enrichment / understimulated? So I have covered this in a couple articles. In my most recent one, Why Enrichment Isn't Extra, that's the title of it. You can find it on the blog section of my website. I do go pretty in depth into this, but the main one is obviously stereotypies. That's a pretty telltale sign, pacing, head swinging, repetitive patterns, agitation. One of the main reasons this kind of happens is that, animals aren't able to, it's a repeated attempt to try to adapt to the environment, and to, a lot of the time, to show, to experience the natural behaviors that they're supposed to be displaying in the wild, and not being able to display them, and failing to kind of cope with the environment that they're being put in. So you really need to assess how the animal is actually coping with the environment, as opposed to looking for signs that the enrichment is actually lacking or it's understimulated. So
yeah, and this is where you too, like, it's so critical as a keeper to go through your natural history, looking at your exhibit with a critical eye right off the bat, and saying, well, where are our gaps? Where are our limitations? What are we able to do within the constraints of what we have at our disposal? Again, like my browse experience is more than, oral stereotypies are pretty common in giraffe in captivity, or in horses. Shout out to the Horses in the Morning podcast, I'm sure, Kyle.
Yeah.
Good audience.
Yeah,
there.
cribbing, stuff like that.
Cribbing,
stable
bar
vices.
biting.
Yeah.
So all that kind of stuff, like, the hypothesis there would be that there's something missing in terms of structure and texture that they're missing out on in their diet, or something like that. And so that's why it's important when we talk about enrichment calendars and stuff, like maybe having versatility is so important in your program, and being responsive to what you're seeing in your animal. Mm-hmm. Like if I see an animal that I know eats a lot of browse in their lifetime, and that's one of the main portions of diet, and I'm not feeding browse at the time, and I'm noticing, a lot of oral stereotypies, that they're constantly licking bars, licking little, like you've got, they're licking the paint off the walls or something like that.
Yeah.
That's where you need to change something. You need to change it, because you don't want this to become a long-term repetitive stereotyping.
Absolutely. And I think, it's important to really to know the kind of full range of behaviors that your animals should be displaying in the wild, and trying to hit on every aspect of their life and their kind of day to day if they were in the wild. I think that's a great way of making sure that you're still you have all your bases covered. And I think that's a good way of making sure you don't get to the point that you're actually seeing telltale signs that they're lacking enrichment. Because I think as soon as you start to see signs, you're going to have to start dealing with, it's not a black and white issue as far as how to break a stereotypy or why an animal's showing a stereotypy. So trying to get there before you're actually seeing the signs is the best plan of attack. It's not always possible, but really try to be looking at what your animal's supposed to be doing in the wild, and trying to hit on all of those bases. I'm
sensing a lot in this podcast so far. We've hit two pretty good tropes. There's thrive or survive. And what did you just talk about there? This is you got to be proactive in things and make sure it's, you're gonna have to cut this part out, Kyle, because I know I just had a thought in my head, and it was like, the best defense is a good offense. That's the one.
That's it.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's true, because as soon as you get to that point where you're starting to see signs, it's not necessarily too late, but they can be hard to correct, and you might already be too far gone. So definitely definitely that's something you want to be proactive with.
Mm-hmm.
So we have another one, which is very, very common. Which is a common topic with keepers: enrichment with natural materials versus artificial materials. I definitely want to start off by saying, uh, I think keepers and everybody wants an animal's exhibit to look like their natural habitat, right? Like we like natural enrichment just looks better, right? It does. But I will say facilities that say all of the enrichment must be 100% natural, must look a certain way, and must adhere to these exact guidelines. I think that's super, super limiting and, dare I say, irresponsible. Because I think that really puts you in a box of, some of these problems and some of the enrichment challenges that you're going to be encountering. You got to have all of the tools in your toolbox, and I think although natural enrichment items look great, this isn't a natural environment. So I think we need to be open to unnatural enrichment items as well. If an animal really likes hitting a boomer ball around and that's what it likes to do, then we should do that. And although it doesn't look natural, if the animal welfare is above everything else here. So everybody wants to see natural enrichment in the exhibit. We want it to look a certain way. You want to see an orangutan swinging through the rainforest. Like, it's just the way you want to, you like it, it's appealing, but it's also very, very limiting. So,
well, and this is also, I think, coming from a place of we need to change the public perspective on things and understanding why.
Absolutely.
And that's why, as facilities, that's why I do think that facilities that are underappreciating how you put forward enrichment are also going to be the facilities that are forgetting to put in, like when you put in good money at the beginning into an exhibit design to make it natural and having all these pockets and built-in, puzzle feeders or whatever that are hidden to a point behind the scenes but have a good forward-facing piece. You're trying to give your keepers a lot of the freedoms of using unnatural or like synthetic enrichment, while it's still the forward-facing part of it looks natural to the exhibit in the biome that you're trying to create.
Yeah.
And then I also think that your PR departments and your signage, any of that going forward, I've seen some great signs that say, hey, this exhibit looks like it's filled with garbage. It's not garbage, it's enrichment. And this is why it's so important to put that in. And changing the narrative and the conversation that we're putting forward is so critical. Like as a field, our whole thing is changing the narrative, right? Because people don't understand it. If they can't understand, they don't love it. If they don't love it, they won't conserve it. So that narrative applies to everything.
Yeah, and it does.
Just as much as enrichment, right? Like that. Yeah. That is how we should approach enrichment too. Is that it's understanding that this is not like, throwing a ball for your dog may not be natural, but it is a supernatural thing when you're targeting a behavior instead of just looking at it as garbage or enrichment or something separate from the animal itself. It's looking at the animal as the ultimate goal of what you're doing.
Yeah, I think by saying you only want natural looking enrichment, that's a excuse for facilities being lazy about their education departments. Like, put out the content. I think
saying that the priority is just public perception.
Yeah.
And that's your top goal.
Yeah, like if you are worried about the public perception of unnatural enrichment, then you need to make sure that your education department is telling people more about what enrichment is and why it's there. And at the end of the day, it's a fear that is completely unfounded, because if no member of the public is going to see if an animal is interacting with an enrichment item, or no matter what it is, as long as it doesn't act like, obviously if it's a recycled Gatorade bottle, they're gonna be like, why is there a Gatorade bottle in there? But if it's a
Gatorade,
that would be fantastic. Gatorade, if you're listening. But if a member of the public that has no previous education with animals is seeing an animal interacting with an object in a positive way, that's a very easy thing to explain away. Like that's not something that's going to be negative. No one's going to film an animal like playing with or interacting in a natural way with an unnatural item and frame that in a negative way unless it's an actual piece of garbage. So I think you just do a little bit of education, and then that solves that.
And I will
I don't
say,
think it's a debate.
I've seen a lot of different zoos, and some of my, like, this is maybe from a keeper perspective, just because we're all nerding out a little bit with it, but I have loved how certain zoos frame the conversation differently. Like, they'll put something in there, like, say with, grizzly bears or something, you put in I don't know, some sort of insulated cooler, and you change the conversation where you say they're encountering this because people throw away garbage in the wild, and it's got food in it, and you need to learn behavior, and this is why it's important to pick up after yourself. Like, changing the narrative, what you're telling, so people understand that this isn't something that's exclusive to the zoo. Like, animals are in our world, we're in their world, and the lines are not crisp and clean. It's all shade gray. And so what you do has an impact. That whole narrative is something we have to push in every aspect, and that's why this non-natural enrichment, synthetic enrichment, I think it's such a cool conversation to have, where some zoos have really rocked it in terms of their signage, in terms of their education and their angle on things. And others can learn from that by a long shot.
It's like saying you can only do a task with your right hand while your left hand is available too. Like, there's
picking your nose at that point.
It's just not a, I don't think it's an argument that facilities, or a topic that facilities need to worry about. Like, I think just a little bit of education can completely circumvent that argument, and you can give the enrichment that best suits the animal, as opposed to worrying if it's natural or non-natural. So that's what I think of that. So that's pretty much it for the most part for what we had to talk about today. We have a few things that we will talk about, next episode. But if you have any more questions that you want us to do, like the Q&A sort of thing that we just did for the last two questions, definitely submit them. Shoot us a message. We would love to talk about any sort of questions or topics that you want us to talk about. But yeah, that was fantastic, and Ben will be with us for some more podcasts. So thank you, Ben.
Depending on how good this has been for people, if you like what we're talking about and how we're talking about it, definitely leave some comments. I'm sure Kyle can boot me at any time. So so please, I'm on the line here.
So thank you for joining us again, Ben. That was a fantastic podcast, and I look forward to doing some more episodes with you. So
thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you, guys. We will talk to you guys next time. Thank you.